As a marketer, you often don't understand what needs to happen in the background for those tools to do what they do.
A salesperson positioning a new product, it's so easy, a marketer can do it. And I think that's the great thing that's come about with these like low code, no code platforms. It really does empower a marketer. But I think where they start lacking is...
Today on the pod, we'll be talking to Ravi Chandramouli. He's co-founder and head of solutions engineering here at Smart Panda Labs. We'll be talking to Ravi about the importance of marketing and technical teams working together to solve complex problems. We'll also be talking about these off-the-shelf, so easy a marketer can do it solutions. While these solutions are great, we have to be very careful about how they're being used. Finally, we'll be talking about how to leverage AI to help accelerate technical capabilities for marketers, but how it can also be very dangerous when it comes to things like security and authentication. Let's get started. Ravi, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. We're excited to have you and having a chance to talk to you today.
Glad to be here.
Great thing about being able to speak to you today is the advantage of all the experience you have, certainly on the technical side with solutions engineering, with web development, both front-end and back-end development. But the fact that really your entire career has been focused on doing that, working alongside business and marketing teams. And I think that really gives you a very powerful and unique perspective because, as I think you know, on the pod, we really talk about the importance of the alignment between marketing and product and IT and making sure all those things really are working in lock sync to make the post-click experience everything it needs to be. So I'd love to kind of get your thoughts to kind of jump things off on this idea of tools that are so easy, even a marketer could do it. So a lot of times companies will position themselves and their platforms, technologies and tools of ways of saying, essentially, marketer, here's how you can get around working with IT, right? And just use our tool. And it's so easy. You can just go in there and you can drag and drop and point and click, and you can make all these magical, wonderful things happen on your website or your web application or whatever it may be. What are those hidden complexities that marketers typically don't understand about those tools that you've learned over the years in your experience that it's really important to be highlighted today?
We've known each other for probably going on almost 15 years now. And I think it's been a running joke with us and even with our clients of, a salesperson positioning a new product, an off-the-shelf product of like, it's so easy, a marketer can do it, but what does that really mean? Like what's the skill set of the marketer? What's the background information that they need? What's changed probably from when we've started having this discussion is that a lot of these products that are coming right off the shelf are very easy stuff for somebody to use. They do offer that out of the box, so easy a marketer can do it kind of functionality. But I think where they start lacking is they're able to meet some of the, we'll call them easier requirements. Oftentimes we'll look at like an A/B testing tool. They offer, some easier things like a WYSIWYG to be able to change a color. But if you want to start diving into some more advanced features, within tracking or making larger scale changes, or maybe the application's a little bit more complex and hooking into the code isn't nearly as straightforward, I think that's where you can get a lot of hiccups. But that being said, the technology companies have made great strides, especially like bringing in new tools with AI to help the marketers actually use these tools better and, incorporating it into the platforms themselves.
You mentioned it's a conversation that we have a lot. And as a marketer, you often don't understand what needs to happen in the background for those tools to do what they do. And depending on the tool, depending on what you're trying to do with it, often in order for it to look great in the front, it's a mess in the back, right? So I don't know, you think about, I know your early years, you spent working in a lot of restaurants. I think about, okay, well, this great meal is being served in front of me and it looks all, perfectly plated and great, but the kitchen's a disaster. It's a hot mess of what it took to make that happen, right? So I think about that same thing. It's nice to be able to say, I can drag and drop and make this happen. But the thing it does to the code, right? The impacts it has on the code standpoint can create such a heavy load. It can do things like cause issues with page speed. It might cause issues with other browsers, with other resolutions, right? That a marketer won't readily see. They think this is all fine and great. until they go through that thorough process of kind of QAing and making sure, does this look exactly the way I want it to look across multiple browsers? Does it look the same way on a smartphone? Does it look right on a tablet? And that's when they find those issues, right? That kind of trips them up and they don't understand why. And it's like, you need to understand what these tools are really doing and how those tools really impact the ultimate experience that you're delivering to the people on the end. So yeah, thank you for really being able to speak about that. So let's talk a little bit more about those tools, right? So we've got these kind of, so easy a marketer can do it tools like A/B testing tools, like sometimes email service providers allow kind of that plug and play, drag and drop functionality that marketers tend to really like, and some of that's great. But then you've got even tools that are now offering kind of business users to do things that are a little bit more intense, right? So maybe like tools that allow for integration, tools like Zapier and Make.com and tools like that that allow for that kind of front end, back end, kind of no code, low code functionality. Do you think marketers are able to take advantage of tools like that to help kind of allow different systems to be able to talk to each other in ways that perhaps they couldn't before?
And I think that's a great thing that's come about with these like low code, no code platforms, especially for making these connections, like you mentioned, from front end to back end. You know, it really does empower a marketer to be able to make connections of data that previously would have had to go through the IT department, go through developers, looking at all the specs that might need to go in it, even authenticating back and forth, understanding those more complex tasks. It really takes care of those for you. Again, there are limitations to what's going to be done. These platforms are generally making connections that are widely available. So, you'll have your LinkedIn forms to Salesforce. Those are something that's a lot of people are doing, but maybe you have LinkedIn forms that you need to go and route to, a data lake that you're running, and that connection might not exist. Are there ways to still use these low code platforms? 100%. But it goes from low code to now you still start needing a little bit more technical experience. Not saying that marketers haven't started gaining those sorts of skills, but it does, start moving towards a little bit more complexity.
I can definitely see it happen. In fact, I've seen it happen, right? I've run into that experience where, okay, this has gone beyond my skill level. This is above my pay grade.
You make it to 90%, and then all of a sudden you're like, I've hit the wall. Like I just can't do this. Like either the tool can't do it or you lack the knowledge. But again, it's kind of mentioned on the front end of this where these tools are now incorporating AI. So you can query if you hit that roadblock. Maybe there's a question that you can ask AI that can help you get over that roadblock. Is it always accurate? That's probably debatable, but maybe it will give you enough to be able to make that connection to be able to get through that.
If I go into AI, right, I go into a ChatGPT, a Gemini, wherever the case is, and I say, okay, I need a script that I can use in a Zap to integrate this to this, and this is what I want the script to do. It spits out this script, right? I paste it in there, and I think, okay, good, I'm ready. I can rock and roll. Has an engineer, how concerning is it to you that someone is taking this script and putting it in there, and the person who's pasting the script in there and then turning this on has no clue what that script is saying? They're just trusting that, AI wrote it, so it must be fine, it must be good, even though I can't even begin to interpret what that script is saying. Is that like something that would concern you from an engineering and technical standpoint?
Using in terms of vibe coding. So it's you write by the vibe of what you feel it would need to do, need the language model to do for you. In a case like where you're using one of these low code platforms where you're really just making a connection, I don't see the risk as being as high because it's a very focused connection that you're doing. Now, if you were to say like, I need to rewrite an application, and I'm going to ask, ChatGPT or whatever model you want to use to rewrite, your authentication code, or I can't figure out how to write authentication. That's obviously a little bit bigger of an issue because you're starting to, get into security, privacy, and a lot more back-end functionality.
So would you say, and we don't want to come up with like general rules of thumb because every situation is a little bit different, but would you say that probably the more enterprise an organization stack is, probably the sooner that you're going to run into that point where it's like, okay, I really need someone with some technical background to have eyes on this. Because as you mentioned, it's one thing to say, I'm going to connect a LinkedIn form to Salesforce, right? That's pretty straightforward. It's another thing where you're saying, well, I have Salesforce and I have to send this information to the CRM and I have to send it to the data lake at the same time, or I have to send information to a CDP or something like that. Would you say with basically as the stack gets more complicated, that again, you probably want to get a technical person involved sooner in that process to kind of validate what's happening?
Maybe not for the reason that you might be alluding to, where it's like it's too complicated for a marketer. I think it's better to have understanding of your IT department, the architects understanding the problems that you're trying to solve, because there's maybe things that they can do to alleviate that won't require a third party tool. They may be able to change the architecture of a website so that it is pushing data to multiple places, that you're not having to necessarily, I don't want to say go around, but you know kind of bypass some of the development that's already been done for your applications.
I'm glad you said that, right? Because a lot of the challenge that sometimes happens between marketing and IT is maybe marketing or the business in general not getting IT involved as soon as possible. And then even if they do, maybe just not doing a great job of articulating to IT exactly what are we trying to do here? What are the problems we're trying to solve? What are the specifications that we need to meet in order to kind of deliver the experience that we're trying to get from a technical perspective? And I'm sure, I'm saying I'm sure, I know for a fact you run into that situation many times over the course of your career, just even on a corporate level. Never mind the fact that that's a challenge that we kind of try to mitigate, right, and help companies with on a daily basis, really, and what we're doing at Smart Panda Labs. So, from your standpoint, how have you found it? What ways have you found to better get IT and marketing to communicate better with each other, to allow marketers to better articulate to IT, here's what I'm trying to do, here's what I'm trying to solve, in a way that IT can say, okay, I understand what you're saying. Here's how I can help you.
I think the first thing that the marketing teams can do is plan ahead. Make sure that the IT team kind of knows what the direction that they're going. Um, if there are going to need to be changes to, let's say a website, whatever it might be, plan a little bit ahead. Um, Two, I think that it was also important, be overly detailed. Bring in any detail that you might not think is pertinent, that the IT department might, you'd be like, they don't care about how I'm marketing this. They don't care how I'm, splitting a database to send out an email. But those sorts of details, they may be important that you don't realize. Um, there might be issues with, being able to pull those data lists. There might be issues with, disconnect on the back end that they need to solve, or that something else needs to be, in place. And then the third thing, and this is something I've stressed to, I've done panels with students. I've talked to, junior developers, anybody. Just ask questions. If you don't know the answer, just say, I don't know. And let people discuss it. Let people try to bring in the experts. Let people try to figure out the solution as a whole, and not just waste your time saying, I don't know, I'm just not going to bring this up, or, moving on and not fully vetting the questions.
Time and again, just us asking a bunch of questions just solves so many problems, right? It gives us not only just a sense of, okay, what are you trying to solve and what are you trying to do here? But as you mentioned, is super important. It gives you context, right? And sometimes the context is everything, right? The same kind of problem or situation put in a different context will lend itself to a different solution, right? Because you're just working in different environments, different technologies, different needs, right? So the context can be just so critically important, and it's so important to make sure you grasp that full picture to be able to really deliver the technical solution that's going to make sense. So, kind of speaking about that, speaking about those key things to keep in mind, maybe can you share with us an example of where you've been able to do that, right? Where you've been able to help kind of bridge that gap between marketing and technical, and deliver something that ultimately met not only the business needs, but the needs of the end customer of the business that you were doing work for.
Well, one of the bigger things we can do is helping a marketing team vet a solution before bringing it to the IT team. So what I mean by that is, we do a lot of work with testing, A/B testing, ABN testing, whatever it might be, and understanding of how the changes are going to impact um, the product, how they're going to impact metrics. So one of the benefits of having a testing tool is that you can kind of vet that before you go through and push that through the technical sources, push that through development, take time out of a sprint cycle, whatever it might be. And you can kind of understand, is this going to be the right solution or is it not? And, every test isn't a win, but a fail is still a win if you realize that the solution that you want to push through is actually not going to impact anything, that you're just going to spin your wheels. And being able to articulate these sorts of projects to the IT team and knowing that they're not going to end up with a bunch of technical debt of having to fix things on the back end because your idea didn't work is a huge benefit for the business. It lets the IT team focus on what they do, their issues that they need to solve, and it also gives the wins marketing where they're getting the solution that they need. It's in place.
One of the things that we talk a lot about is leveraging experimentation as a means by which to prioritize that technical roadmap, right? To kind of validate and say, does this even make sense to do? Is this going to increase revenue? Is this going to reduce costs in the way that we think it is? And as you mentioned, if something ends up being kind of, moot, it doesn't improve or make things worse, then it's like, well, why are we doing it? Why am I investing time and energy and resources in doing that? Should that even be on the roadmap? Or if it's there because it needs to be there for aesthetic purposes or something like that, well, then how do we prioritize that against these other changes that we can make that we do know will measurably improve revenue or will measurably reduce operating costs or things like that, right? So it creates this picture of saying, how can we have this finite amount of production resources? How do we use those resources most efficiently and most effectively and get the most out of them? And by doing something like experimentation, which is really a meeting of the business side and the technical side, you're able to say, okay, should we or should we not do this? Okay, we should. Great. What's the priority of that in terms of the impact it's going to have on the business? And where should we put that on the roadmap? And now all of a sudden, it's not just this barrage of competing priorities on a roadmap where if everything's important, nothing's important, right? And you just have 50 things on the roadmap to get done because they're just random requests from the business. But now you have this thing of saying, hey, we had these 50 requests. We ran this through experimentation. 30 of these requests didn't make any kind of impact. Do we even need to do them at all? 15 of these actually made things worse. So we should just dismiss those ideas, right? And now all of a sudden you've really whittled this down to a list of things that are impactful and that you can prioritize to really move the business. And I think that's something that really needs to be talked about more, both from the marketing standpoint and from the technical leader standpoint, because that's really a place where they can kind of meet together and ultimately drive really positive results that speak to the business goals of the organization and the enterprise, and not just kind of the siloed goals of a particular department. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, we talk about testing mostly on a marketing side, but there's valuable tools there for the IT department as well. They might need to roll out new features. These features might be more UI centric that they can do through more of a front end client side A/B testing that they can now test. They're obviously they can go to more back end heavy tools. To do the testing as well. So it's not just a tool or a mindset that is just a business side. It can benefit the company holistically.
Between the advent now of both client side and server side testing, feature flagging, right? You have this opportunity to really put the entire kind of production process in this experimentation flow, right? And be a lot kind of leaner about it and kind of rolling things out, getting data, iterating, and making that flow a lot more optimized to, again, drive the most value out of what's being put there in the marketplace. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's so important as well. Talking about the different tools that are available in the marketplace, we've already talked a lot about so easy a marketer could do it. We've talked about these like no code, low code solutions that exist in the marketplace. But then you've got this debate of saying, okay, I have this SaaS provider, this SaaS tool that I can go in the marketplace and use to do X number of things. For example, experimentation, but it could be anything else. Or I've got a whole development team or perhaps a developer or someone I know who's a developer, an agency, and they can come in and they can create the exact custom solution I want, right? They can make this do exactly what I want it to do. It matches the exact processes um and nuances of my business. How do you help business people to make that decision between saying, okay, I'm going to buy this off the shelf, or I'm just going to, pay someone, or maybe I have an internal resource, develop this custom just for me and my business and just operate like that? How do you kind of help business people weigh the pros and cons of that?
One, have you fully vetted all the solutions available, all the off the shelf solutions? Because there's a myriad of solutions for almost any use case that you can find at this point. And as we mentioned, like a lot of these new softwares, they're very open. You can customize them. Just use Salesforce as a platform. There's tons of customizations you can use with Salesforce. Is there a way that you can use one of these off the shelf platforms without having to go that custom route? And when people do go that custom route, I feel like there's a lot of times maybe not fully understanding the hidden costs of custom software. A lot of times, you don't realize, do I need 24/7 support? Do I need to be having triage, and paying somebody to sit on a help desk on a Sunday afternoon? Do I need disaster plans because I own all the servers? I don't have a Salesforce I can call and say, hey, there's an issue. And you need to have those people available. And then you run into other, you know, technology issues with maintaining the software, documenting releases, documenting uh, a release schedule for bug fixes, for new features. Are you going to be able to keep up with that release cycle, those feature cycles that maybe an off-the-shelf software takes care of for you? Um, is there a use case for custom code? Of course there is. It's probably very niche. I generally probably wouldn't recommend it at this point. I'd probably try to find either one enterprise solution, or maybe two combined, or maybe you can use something like a low code, no code platform to make a connection. Um, on the enterprise scale, when you have a tool like MuleSoft, that's connecting all these dots in the back end, that's basically making all the connections you need, without having to go through like heavy lifting with APIs.
I position the question has this option between kind of these enterprise providers of software, and then you've got these custom solutions. And I'd almost argue, and I'm curious to see if you'd agree with this, right? There's almost kind of a third kind of hybrid, right? Where maybe you have, well, first of all, there's the hybrid of saying, hey, I'm going to take this enterprise off the shelf and I'm going to customize that a bit, as you alluded to. But then I'd say you also have some companies who kind of create a solution that's maybe very niche, right? So I'm creating this solution and this is just for like real estate, for commercial real estate, right? And it's very industry specific. And maybe it's a company that's not as big as a Salesforce or an Optimizely or some of these are larger MarTech players. But they've developed this solution that's very niche. And that has pros and cons too, right? Because you've got the situation where I'm using that solution. It's built for real estate as an example, and it's able to handle commercial real estate very well. But because those solutions oftentimes are maybe one of the only players in the industry, there's not a whole lot of competitive pressure for those tools to integrate or to innovate. I know we've run into that several times, right? Where they have this tool and it's like, well, they kind of own the market. Like they're the only ones who really do this or do commercial real estate. But because of that, it's like, well, can the tool do this? Can the tool do that? And it's like, oh, no, I can't do that. It can't do that. And the company isn't super invested in investing in doing that because the market isn't pushing them, because it's like, well, where are my customers going to go? Like we're the ones who kind of own, 95% of commercial real estate all uses our tool. So I know one of the things that we've talked about and we typically warn our clients about is saying, be careful about using those tools because the market isn't going to push them to innovate the way the market pushes a Salesforce or an Optimizer to innovate in the same way. So yeah, it may be great for your business for today, But as people begin to demand a more robust digital experience, that tool can't deliver that experience because it's not innovating. It doesn't have those integrations. It can't, integrate with your data lake and pull data from that. It can't do automated campaigns. It can't do personalization or whatever the case is. And the company just doesn't have the pressure against them to say, we need to make sure it does that. Is that something that you yourself kind of have come to kind of also be very wary of as you've worked with clients on your end of the scale?
Yeah, I think anytime you get into that niche market, you kind of start getting pigeonholed into, uh, you know, are you almost over solutioning a problem? You're just making it so specific for an industry that it's only ever going to work in one sort of use case, which ends up happening a lot with custom software. It's you make it so specific to your use case at the time that how do you innovate? How do you iterate? When you've built this platform from, invest $1 million in custom software, and then in another 2 years, your business model has changed a little bit, or you need to integrate, what do you do then? Do you have to go back through and rewrite? Do you have to, refactor your entire code base? So I think it is difficult when you get into these smaller niche businesses. But I think that's where some of your like digital planning and scaling comes into thought, where, can we start maybe with one of these niche products? And as we build our business, understand that, you know, as we grow, as these other companies grow, is there opportunity to maybe say, well, maybe we can get into a more enterprise level that offers, it might be a little bit more expensive, but it does offer all the features that we want, and we'll just have to do a little bit of customization. Maybe, but instead of having to own like a very customized niche product, you're moving towards that larger scale enterprise platform.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
On the flip side of that, though, there are customers that buy that big shiny enterprise platform and have no team to be able to support it, have no ability to run it, and you're stuck with that large bill and all these features, but you don't know how to use them, or you don't have use cases to use them.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, right? Because we literally, the two of us, were on a client call yesterday, right, where we kind of talked about that, where here are these robust enterprise solutions, but the client was having a challenge in maximizing those solutions and all their functionality and capabilities and really driving ROI. And it's so important for organizations to be careful to say, when that happens, maybe not understanding why that's happening, their solution might be, well, then we need another piece of software to help us do this particular piece, right? So now the math on that just doesn't work out well because you're already not getting the ROI out of what you have today. You're bringing in this other solution because you think that may be the problem and this other solution is going to fix it. And it may make things a little bit better, but then you're adding all this additional cost. And now the math equation works out even worse in terms of truly driving ROI for their organization, as opposed to saying, hey, look, we need to invest in the right resources, whether that's external resources in terms of a partner or internal resources in terms of team members to really maximize what we have today, to get the processes in place where we're getting the full value out of the tools, and then saying, great, now that we've maximized it, we're getting full value, we're moving forward, we're optimizing, we're iterating. Now it's like, how do we bring in another technology to further speed that up and become an accelerator to what we're already doing, what we've already figured out? And that's really the challenge. So thank you for even mentioning that, because that's a whole nother aspect of it that's really important for marketing leaders to understand.
I think it's the idea that maybe you have somebody suggesting a silver bullet. Like it's if you have this platform, if you buy all these products, these are all the things you can do. But if you don't, crawl before you walk, if you don't have these processes in place, if you don't understand everything going on within your business to use them, you're just spending money and not being able to fully maximize your costs.
So I'll kind of leave on this question. As you see the digital experience constantly being pushed forward, right? Customer expectations are being pushed, and they're being pushed by the leaders in the industry, right? So they're being pushed by like the Amazons of the world. That's the experience people want to have. And whether they're doing retail or they're in healthcare or they're in real estate, people don't make that kind of distinction. They just say this should work like Amazon works. This should be as easy and as fluid as an Amazon or a Google or another kind of leader in that space. So they take those expectations and they apply them across industries. So you have these organizations that maybe aren't as digitally mature, but they're still trying to meet those same customer expectations. And they don't understand the 50 things that need to happen to get them to the point where they can have an experience that's Amazon or Google like for what they're trying to do and what they're trying to deliver. As those things continue to happen and as organizations try to meet those challenges and try to mature, where do you see that relationship between marketing and IT going in the future?
And it's already been heading in this path. I mean, I'm I'm the product of it heading in this path from years ago, is where you start getting more technical people sitting with those marketing teams. And I think as as the industry grows and as time moves on, I think you're going to see more and more marketing teams having their own set of developers, their own set of technical resources, or at least somebody that has a very technical background sitting full time with the marketing team. They're dedicated to the marketing team. I know this exists today, but it doesn't exist in every company. And I don't think every company understands that like you kind of need those people now to help maximize the tools that you're bringing in. Um, and I think IT departments, for the most part, they're probably now relinquishing the control. They a lot of times it used to be anything software related. They wanted to have a stranglehold on it, um, but they're the bottleneck to progress for the marketing side. Content needs to be updated, products need to be updated, testing needs to happen. You need to iterate a little bit faster, and I think they're understanding that they can still own part of the process and they can still own a lot of the solutions, but giving the marketing team the power, knowing that the marketing team has these individuals that are skilled. It's not just, somebody that's like, well, I took a weekend class learning HTML, so I'm going to rewrite the website. It's people that are coming from years of experience. Maybe they worked on the IT side. Maybe they sat on that side of the company prior. So I think it's really going to be more of a blend of skill sets. And I think even that blend of skill sets, I think we're seeing marketers in general, the skill sets changed. It's changed from a, how do I say this? Like a look and feel like I like this picture to, well, I've looked at Google Analytics. I've looked at the numbers. I'm understanding more about the statistics. It's getting more to that. I can run a SQL query to pull data. I can go into Looker Studio. I can do whatever it is. And it's that skill set is really starting to bubble up on the marketing team side from your traditional marketers.
Yeah, definitely. The digital marketer, not in the sense of digital advertising, right? But in terms of digital first thinking, right? And being really data driven. The technical marketer, right, is the term that we use a lot in terms of what that means and marrying those two skills and being that bridge and that translator between the full on engineering IT technical world and the full on marketing, creative brand world, right? And being able to kind of fully connect those worlds in a way that flows for the customer experience. So really important point. Thank you for highlighting that. Ravi, thank you so much for being on the pod today. I'm happy you're here. Of course, being a co-founder, you didn't have a choice, but we're happy to have you anyway.
Thank you for having me.